Welcome to the Bombshell Business Podcast, where driven women in business learn how to become more bold, brave, and unwaveringly confident. Feel empowered and challenged through inspiring stories and tell it like it is advice for business, life, and leadership. Hey, Bombshell. Welcome to the Bombshell Business Podcast. I am your host, Amber Hurdle, the Velvet Machete, coming to you with lots of good truth about business and life. And speaking of truth, I want to know your truth. I have been chatting with so many of you, which has been the most joyful experience. I love getting to talk to you and just finding out what's going on in your business and what you need and what your problems are and what your victories are. I mean, you all are some bad mamma jammas. That's all I got to say. I am tickled pink with everything that I've learned about you so far. And so for those of you who have scheduled those times to hop on the phone and chat with me, I very much appreciate it. And if you didn't have a chance to do that or you can't break away from your operations, I want to offer another opportunity to give me your feedback. So even if you don't have the time again to get on the phone, you can just fill out a survey, and then I can continue to give you the value that you're looking for when you tune in to the Bombshell Business Podcast and beyond. So you can go directly to bit.ly/bombshell feedback. That's bit.ly/bombshell feedback. bit.ly/bombshell feedback. Or you can just go to amberhurdle.com/podcast with an S and look for today's show notes, episode 46, and it'll link right to it, and you can fill that out and just answer a few questions so I can be sure that I am delivering you the highest value. Okay, we have an amazing episode today. We're going to be talking all about remote teams, remote workers, how to manage remote workers, what type of retreats you might want to consider if you work with a remote team, or maybe you're in corporate and you are being transitioned into a remote role, or perhaps you are thinking about being hired as a remote worker. It's happening more and more. I literally just last week was talking to one of my clients, and they are moving a big piece of their operations out of their building, and they are putting everybody at home to work remotely like another department does within that company already. So this is the trend. It's the trend in big business. It's the trend in small business. I mean, I have team members who live right here in Middle Tennessee, but they work from home because that's the most flexible for them. That's the best for me, and we work harmoniously that way. And then of course the people who don't live in Nashville, they all work remotely, but that's kind of a no-brainer. So we're going to dig into that today, and I hope that you find as much value listening to this as I did interviewing Miss Summer. Here we go. Okay, well, now it's time to talk to Summer Weirich. She is the co-founder and director of events for Rebel and Connect. She works with remote leaders and allows them to figure out the how and when details of the event planning process to ensure a seamless event experience for everyone involved. She also believes that work-life harmony is a must, as do I. So we're going to get into exactly what that means and dig a little bit deeper. But for now, Summer, welcome to the Bombshell Business Podcast.
Thanks so much, Amber. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So I got to give you a little background. Y'all know I get umpteen gajillion pitches a day to be on the podcast, which I find funny because we are not like structurally interview-based show. I mean, we do have guests, but so we get a gajillion a day, and unfortunately we can't respond to all of the requests because we have so many. But I actually looked at Summers myself and was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to her. And I don't even think I forwarded it to Abby to vet or do anything with. And here's why. First of all, rebellion and connection, like those are amazing words. I totally get where you're coming from with that, and I would love to dig and unpack that a little bit. Everybody knows I have a huge event production background, so I do see how bringing people together strengthens relationships and bonds. Belly to belly is unbeatable. And when you say that you believe the brand culture is so important, I mean, that is the birthplace of a brand. And so I'd like to dig into that a little bit as well. But before we do all of that, let's talk remote teams. Tell me about that. Why is that becoming such the norm nowadays?
I think there's a lot of different reasons as to the why for remote work, and they range from, a parent needing to be home with their child, whether that's the mother or the father. And also, people are much more conscious about how much money and gas they're spending getting to work. I was actually reading an article the other day that talks about San Francisco, and most of the people in the area commute 45 minutes or further to get to work. And when compared to LA, which people commute, 5 to 10 minutes, and it makes a huge strain on not only on, our environment, but also on our economy, on the infrastructure of the roads. And there's just so many reasons. Also, if you have a company that's based in a physical location, you've got to pay for the space, you've got to pay for the internet, you've got to pay for potentially a water cooler, etc., so on and so forth. And it not only saves time and energy, it saves money, and it also allows you to choose from a larger pool of applicants. You don't have to choose the best person in your area. You get to choose from the best person globally, and you can have the best team in that way.
Yeah. So many things to touch on there. And a big one is that more and more larger companies, Fortune 500s, are moving to this model where it used to be a joke that somebody would ask for a couple days a week to be able to work from home. Now, entire departments are becoming that way, and I think I see that trickling down into the entrepreneur space as well. So, just I mentioned this pre-show, more and more I'm getting all different types of listeners, but the foundation, what really built the Bombshell Business Podcast was those brick and mortar hair salons and day spas and law firms and fitness centers. And I say that all the time because those are the ones who really write to me. How can they leverage remote employees while they have a brick and mortar? Like, what type of roles could they fill outside of their stylist or their front desk person?
Yeah, there certainly are a lot of different types of jobs that you can include. If you're wanting to outsource your social media, for instance, that's one of the first things that I want to outsource once I feel like the time is right. And you can also, like you mentioned, you can get somebody like a VA or a secretary. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of different ways that you can utilize a remote worker, and you can have a remote worker on your team as a full-time staff. For instance, they even allow people to fill prescriptions online. I even saw something about I haven't used it yet, but I saw something about you can get your contact lens prescription renewed through an online doctor. And like I said, I don't know how that works yet, but there are a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs that you can use that are remote, and you can integrate those remote people into your team instead of before, when you weren't able to attend a meeting if you weren't physically in the office. You can video call in or conference call in, and video really helps you to see what the person truly means. You actually get to see their face. You can tell if they're engaged. I know a huge debate is whether or not remote workers will be as productive, and whether or not remote workers will be engaged on things like meetings. And what we found through research and through our own explorations is that remote workers are more engaged. Obviously there are protocol when you start any kind of meeting. You stand up out of your desk, you walk to the room where the meeting is, you sit down. So there's some sort of protocol for that, and you are physically moving your body into the meeting space, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're present mentally, even if you're there physically. So remote workers tend to work a lot harder than a lot of people, but one of the things that you have to pay attention to with people who work remotely is make sure that they're not overextending themselves, because you can work a 15-hour day. I do it all the time, but you still need to make sure to take time for yourself. And sometimes when you're in the groove, a 15-hour day is worth it to get that much work in one day, and you can get the harmony that you need between the play and the rest afterwards or in between.
Yeah. So one of my really great friends works for the Pentagon, and she works remotely from Tennessee, and then goes, every so often for particular meetings in Washington D.C. So there is definitely a need, no matter what type of business you have or what you're doing. There's a need to have that belly to belly, that I see you, I'm looking in the eyes, we're sharing an experience together. And so that is what you all are about. So tell me about that layer, and why did y'all decide to start this business?
Oh gosh, there's so many reasons why we decided to start the business, and part of it is that it's a blue ocean. There are a lot of remote workers. There are a lot of companies that are adding remote people to their team. And there's a lot of managers that are amazing managers in a physical space, and then they have to do some kind of change management when they either move over to primarily remote workers or where they add remote workers on the team. And these leaders need to develop skills that they already have, but they need to develop those skills in a different way using different technology. So partially the blue ocean, and along with that, we realized that there really is a huge need for especially teams that are remote to go on company retreat. Certainly it's something that you can do, and a lot of teams do when they have a physical brick and mortar business, but it becomes even more important when you're a remote worker because you don't have that water cooler time. You don't have that, Friday happy hour beer with the team. You don't have that physical interaction. And when you are having a physical interaction with somebody or experiencing travel or whatever it is you're doing with them in person, it strengthens the bonds. It changes the relationship from, your name is John and my name is Summer, to, oh my gosh, John and I had so much fun when we were on our company retreat in Costa Rica and we shared this experience. And I love that he speaks so well of his wife and they have 2 kids. And I got to meet them on the previous retreat because it was all family, and it gets you excited. It gets you more invested in the company, and happier workers make for more productive workers.
Absolutely.
So whatever it is, bringing 2 people together, just like you said, belly to belly. I hadn't heard that term before, but bringing 2 people face to face, eye to eye, belly to belly really strengthens those bonds and builds relationships where there potentially weren't any, or they weren't as strong.
Yeah, because, when you think about who are you going to put at the top of your priority list as a fellow employee, not even as a business owner, but so bombshells, I want you to put yourself in the minds of somebody else on your team and think about when you reported to somebody and you had to get work done. You're going to help your friend first, right? So developing those deeper relationships with your colleagues takes it from, oh, Summer asked me to do this. I've got all this other work I have to do. I don't have time for Summer. I'm just going to, not respond to her email, which can be twice as bad if you're working remotely. But if it's like, oh, Summer and I went ziplining, and then afterwards we had Coronas together. If you have that experience attached to Summer, and Summer's like, I really need you to do this. Can you get it done by the end of the day? You're going to be way more likely to be like, heck yeah, I got you, girl. It's just two different experiences. So tell me about, how do you do this remote work summit? Is that multiple companies together? Do you do it individually for each company? Do you plan it and then you're not a part of it? Do you facilitate? How does this work?
So Remote Work Summit is our company's big event for each year. And this is the inaugural year. It's happening in San Marcos, La Laguna, Guatemala. And the primary people who are going to come to the event are remote leaders of remote teams. The reason for that is we've got speakers who are speaking on company culture, leadership, team building. We have some remote work expert panels. We've got a really great lineup. And just as I mentioned to you that, work, play, rest is a harmony that's important in my life, it's a harmony that's important within our business as well. And anytime that we plan a Rebel and Connect event, whether it's, our personal event or whether it's a custom event for somebody else, we do our best to integrate the work, play, rest. Like I said, it's custom, so it might not be the same harmony with a different team. But with that, we have yoga in the morning at Remote Work Summit. We have breaks in between the speakers so that, if you're an introvert, you can recharge. Or regardless of if you're an introvert or an extrovert, if you meet somebody that you were standing next to at the last presentation, or if you met somebody down at yoga and you feel like you need to engage in that conversation, you can. We're also recording all of the speaker sessions. So if you do get wrapped up in that conversation and you meet somebody really cool and you just really need to continue that conversation, you might be missing it live, but you'll get the recording. And we have evening fun events in the evening, from a cacao sunset party, which is a heart opener, to like a networking event the day before. And we also have, cultural and natural immersion excursions. We find that it's important to immerse yourself within the area where you're visiting. If you go to, Chili's or Longhorn Steakhouse, not that I'm saying anything bad about those places, but they're everywhere. Yeah. You can go to them anywhere you visit.
Preach, girl.
And at least most places you visit. But, if you go and enjoy the local food, try some food, get to know some people in the local area, you really have a much richer experience when you travel anywhere. And it's going to be a blast. And what I think makes our event stand out particularly rather in addition to the work, play, rest balance and the beautiful location we have on Lake Etalon, is that we are giving 100% of the profits to 2 local NGOs in the area. Both of those NGOs, we've got Cono Hell and Fincas Buenas, and they are on a mission to empower people in the area and empower them to help them end malnutrition in the rural areas of Guatemala. So they don't just give handouts of food and money. They actually empower people to teach them, they teach them how to do things like weaving, how to prepare food, and they teach them how to use these skills to further their life, to make their life better. And the same with, everybody in the area. And that's the goal of those NGOs. So we're really excited to be giving back to them. And they'll even be coming to our event, giving us a little bit more background about what they do and how they do it. And we even have a local elder from the area who will be doing a traditional Mayan fire dance. So
how neat. That's
going to be a great time.
Yeah. I'm the same way. My husband and I are very well known for the amount we travel, both for our businesses and then also just personally. And we do not do, we barely do it in Nashville. Nashville's such a great food town, but we just don't do chain restaurants. And again, not that they're not good restaurants. Longhorn can make a steak now, but when you're traveling, it's like, why go do something that you could do back at home? And I think that immersion experience is critical to just the wow factor of the memories and the experiences while you're there. So if somebody is thinking about having a retreat, let's just say a custom retreat, whether they are a brick and mortar or they're all virtual or remote, or a hybrid, like what's the frequency of this?
Most companies that do retreats typically do them once or twice a year. And depending on the size of the team, you might want to break out into smaller retreats. So if you have, our team is 3 people and we've had, interns and contractors on and off. But, if you have a much larger team, say a team of, 100 or 200, you might want to have one big retreat so everybody can get to know each other. And then, for instance, if your marketing team could really benefit from getting together in person to, meet each other and to strengthen those bonds, and B can engage in a on a project where, being together is something that will help them get the project done more quickly, or whatever the combination is. If you need to get the marketing team together with, your outreach team, whatever it is, the 2 teams that you need to get together or the 1 team you need to get together, doing that at least once or twice a year will really help your company.
Yeah, I love that. So some of the industries that are really great about this are real estate and multi-level marketing companies. They have these big experiences every year. Like Keller Williams has, I think it's called Family Reunion. And they're conferences, so I don't want to refer to them as retreats, but they do put retreat type experiences in there. So I think it's kind of neat that this stuff has been going on for quite a long time, but now that the way that we do work is becoming more like a traditional real estate world where everybody's an individual, they're all working from their own home offices, or like a multi-level marketing type company, more businesses are starting to position themselves with that same type of internal structure, which creates challenges, but then also really neat opportunities to like you said, save money and increase productivity, and model some of these other types of industries to keep everybody connected and on the same page. So if somebody was like, okay, we have, we've done senior leader retreats or whatever, but we really want to bring in a larger group of people. Would you start with like the sales team? Would you start with administrators? Like, where would you begin in a company? Let's just say that I have a company of 50 people, and they're all over the country. Where would I begin?
Well, I'm sure you know from planning events, Amber, that the why is a huge, huge factor to what you're going to be doing. So we have a signature process that we start with a discovery session. So the discovery session is essentially our coaching package, and everything else we do builds upon the discovery package. And what that looks like is, first off, they'll get, whoever the leader is of the team will get a guided visualization, and they can spend some time going through that. It's about a half an hour where
And
they
so,
can start to think of, the why and what's in their brain. And then from there, they'll have a session with Charlie, who's our director of program development. It's an hour-long session. They're two-day minimum marination time for, our team as well as for the leader. They'll have a session with our director of travel, Rachel. Same thing, the 2-day marination period. And then they'll have a session with me. As a reminder, I'm the director of events. And then we will help develop a survey based on what the leader came up with and what we, discussed in our sessions, and what we came up with would be, a good idea, would be the best idea for their specific team. And then they can send that survey out to their team and get feedback. So the why is a huge thing, and it's really about custom. It has to do with your team. And that's I think also one thing that sets our team apart from a lot of other companies that do retreats, is there's a lot of, you can buy this retreat for X amount of dollars, boom. And yes, that is easy, but the easiest way is not always the right way.
right. So a few questions. I'm actually looking at Summer right now via Skype, and you are a millennial, and definitely you're in Colorado and everything. And I could just tell from your jewelry, like, I got your brand all day long, and I love it. But for those hardcore Gen Xers out there who might want to work with you but don't understand, like, what is guided visualization, what's a marination period, like, let's bring that into more clear terms for people who don't speak that language.
Fair enough. So a guided visualization, Charlie, our director of program development, has a background in coaching. She's got a psychology background. She's worked at different centers with people that need therapy. So she's got a background in people, and she's got training in creating things like a guided visualization. So essentially it's something where, you'd be listening to a recorded, MP3 or tape or whatever, and listening to what she's saying. She'd tell you some things like, and I'm not trained in this, so, but
That's okay.
she'll be telling you things like, imagine that you're on your retreat. Where are you? What do you smell? What do you feel? So it's somebody that's guiding you to figure out what you already have preset in your brain around what you're hoping to do with your team. And potentially that'll bring out, okay, I have all these ideas of what I want. Potentially that might be like, wow, I didn't think of that. It could be a combination of both. So when they come to meet with Charlie, instead of having to delve into that during that first session and, not getting as much from your time, you can focus on that before you come and have a session with Charlie. So you have kind of a starting point to begin at.
That's awesome. And I wanted to dial the down. I hope also that I didn't sound insulting when I said
Oh,
that.
not at all.
It's just that some things can come off, especially in our space. Some things can come off as like woo woo, but they're not. They're really strategic and scientific. And so I wanted to go through that process. And even, I mean, I used to plan events for celebrities and record labels and all kinds of, definitely bottom line driven type of companies with a Y that was attached to a dollar sign, which ultimately these retreats are too, because we're all in business to make money. So how do we get there, and how do we do that in a meaningful way? But one of the first things I did was visualize, what is this experience like? And one of the very last things that I did before the event was show up as a guest and visualize navigating through that event. Like, what does it smell like? What does it look like when I turn this corner? Is that going to be coagulated if that buffet is right there, for an example? If the tents don't line up, are we going to have a rain problem? There's just so many things. So visualization is super powerful. Tell me about the 2-day marination period with your other experts. What does that mean?
It's just a fancy way of saying time to think about what you discussed. So we have a 2-day period in between sessions partially because we want our team to be able to thoroughly look at everything, listen to everything, re-listen to everything, and really be ready to be on point for the next session. And equally as important for the leader of the team who we're connecting with to have the ability to think about what they had. It's kind of like if you're going to the mall and you're going shopping and you're like, oh, I think I want this, but oh, it's really expensive, but I really want it. If you decide that day, you might make the wrong decision. If you leave the mall and you come back a few days later, either you're like, well, I don't really need that, or, oh my gosh, I have to have it. So it really gives you time to think over. And that's a totally off the wall explanation, but I think it brings it back to something simple. That's to perfect. Understand it.
Yeah, no, I'm totally zoning into that. That makes absolute sense. And I think part of what you do and part of the way that business is going now, there are a lot of scary things that are uncertain. Technology is evolving and changing every single day. It is enabling us to have this remote experience. We're getting new processes and all kinds of things in this new wild, wild west of doing business. But it's also, when you have so many options, when you go to that shopping mall and you have everything that you can choose from, it also is now forcing us to be intentional. And I think that is the number one thing. You were intentional about how you reached out to me. You're intentional about how you work with your clients. You're intentional about how you even interact with the places you take your clients. And if I believe that most Bombshell listeners are intentional, mission driven. They do feel like their work is their calling. They definitely want to not just impact the lives of their families, but impact their employees, and then therefore their employees' families and their employees' communities. And leadership is really a calling in and of itself, with a cascading effect into society. And I just love how you all have found your way into becoming a part of that, from a leadership perspective, and empowering people to figure out how to make all of this work in this crazy world we live in now.
It is a crazy world, and you bring up a good point that there are always things changing with technology. There's always something new, and I'm sure you probably have heard of the term shiny object syndrome.
Oh yeah.
So that's one thing is, especially if you are a manager of a team that is co-located, and then you're moving into either partially or fully remote team management. And okay, well, what do I do? Well, we've got to have this, we've got to have that. You really only want as much technology as you need to better your life, to better your day, to better your team. And it's really hard. It's really easy to get caught up in that shiny object syndrome. Oh my God, there's this new this, there's this new that. Well, is there a problem that this can solve that will make your team function better? Or is that just something that you could add on? And if it's the latter, move on and don't even look into it, because it's just going to take your time away from what you can do to progress your team to be more successful.
Absolutely. Love it. So before we get into all of your contact information and how people can potentially work with you or explore that, I always like to ask every guest that I have if there's one piece of advice that you can give bombshell businesswomen, what would that be?
So many different pieces of advice come to my mind, but particularly make sure that you are aware of what your self-worth is. And, there's a lot of research pointing to women in particular not asking for what they deserve.
Yes.
Whether it's in an interview or whether it's, working with a client or whether it's with somebody internally inside of your team. Make sure that you ask for what you need, that you're direct about what you need, and that you're intentional with your actions.
Love it. I love it. All the way back to that word intentional again. Okay, Summer. So I know, let's see here, we have your Twitter, your Instagram, and your LinkedIn, and we'll put all of that in the show notes. And of course, we know all the time, go to amberhurdle.com/podcasts with an S. Look for Summer's episode, and you can connect with her in all of those different platforms. But how do we find out more about this remote work summit?
So we made it pretty easy for y'all. It's just bit.ly/remote work summit. And you can get information there. And then if you've got additional questions, you can reach out to either myself or my colleagues, Charlie Birch and Rachel McGee.
All right. Well, I think this was a fantastic episode. I hope everybody loved it as much as I did. Thank you for what you're doing in the world and for empowering bombshells and the bombshell boys to becoming more bold, brave, and unwaveringly confident in their business and their life. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great.
Thanks for listening to the Bombshell Business Podcast. Visit amberhurdle.com for more resources like show notes, and check out thebombshellbusinesswoman.com to grab my book and download the free bonuses.